Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome in on a Thursday morning. Had a little college basketball last night, as expected. Utah State completely destroyed Wyoming. Maybe that's a little bit of a surprise. I'm not surprised that they'd win by 15 or 20 at home. They got them by 32, 94-62. It was 50-28 at halftime, and Colby King came off the bench with 20 points. And Utah State rolled. Now, next up, they get San Diego State. San Diego State was also at home last night. They crushed Colorado State 73-50. So you got two of the top teams in the Mountain West now ready to go at it because San Diego State is now 9-1. Utah State is 8-2. This is a familiar story. These two teams have been right at the top of the league. I expect when they go into the Pac-12 next year, they'll be right at the top of the league with Gonzaga. And that they will keep it rolling. But this game Saturday, which is 11 a.m. on CBS, it's got a little sizzle to it, which is why CBS wanted it, obviously, right? They're going to roll out some old video. They're going to roll out Sam Merrill making the shot. These two teams have played a bunch of really big games. The Aztecs are now all alone in first place in Mountain West, whereas Utah State is tied for second with New Mexico at 8-2. So, massive game. The Aztecs are 15-5. Played Arizona, number one team in the country, lost to them. Utah State is 17-3. Hasn't had quite the non-conference schedule, but nonetheless, it looks like a massive game, a massive showdown. In addition, it was an error to Arizona. San Diego State lost to Michigan. And if Michigan ends up a 1 seed, I'm not going to be surprised. Michigan just beat Nebraska and gave Nebraska its first loss of the year. So, not quite sure how San Diego State lost to Baylor. That's a little more mystifying to me. In conference, the only loss is at Grand Canyon. And, of course, that is one of the places where Utah State has lost also. They got two losses in conference play, and one of them was at Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon's currently 6-3 in fifth place. So, massive, massive college basketball game coming up Saturday at 11 a.m. when Utah State squares off with San Diego State. Also, a little bit of college football. I don't know if you've put together all the college football schedules for the upcoming season, but, the BYU-Utah game, I was really getting my hopes up that they were going to find some place to put that where it could really be a marquee game and stand out. And what happens is the Big 12 games, they can get some decent broadcast positions, but they go up against heavyweight games, and they can do well, get 2 million, maybe even 3 million viewers, but the networks are really paying for 4 and 5. And the only way to get that is to get into the standalone, TCU did it by playing North Carolina in the Monday Night Football time slot on Labor Day weekend, Monday night, which, of course, would be the Monday Night Football time slot. Glad I cleared that up. And then Iowa State and Kansas State going and playing on week 0, right? They were the only big game on, so we got massive numbers. So that's why we were talking and wondering, the Wednesday night to kick off Thanksgiving weekend, maybe there. Where else could they find a spot to put it? And it ended up on November 7th. And now that all the schedules are out, November 7th is packed with massive games, just massive. Ohio State is playing Oregon on November 7th. Michigan's playing Michigan State on November 7th. Miami's at Notre Dame on November 7th. Alabama is playing LSU on November 7th. I mean, there are just so many big games. So the Utah-BYU game will be wedged in there somehow. I mean, I expect it'll be on Big Fox or ESPN. And it may well get the 1:30 time slot. Maybe it'll be at 8:30 all by itself, but then, most of the country's gone to bed. So that's not so great either. Just not ideal. Not ideal. But we'll see what happens with that. All right, and then there's the NBA basketball. The Utah Jazz played last night, and they were not good again. They got beat by the Golden State Warriors 140-124. Markkanen played. He is clearly not back in top form. He missed a lot of games. He missed a lot of time, and he is still he's still struggling. He is not himself. Although getting him going, and it helps, to get him out there and scoring 30 points. But points weren't the problem. They scored 124 of them. So, yeah, Markkanen was struggling, but Keontae George played and Nurkic played. So, they had plenty going. The problem was they gave up 140 points. And Will Hardy, hey, like you said, slow, 2 steps late, could not close out in a timely fashion on anybody on the three-point line. Got beat on backdoor cuts all night long. It was dreadful, man. It was not good. And Kessler will help, assuming they re-sign him in the offseason. He's back, and you get a shot blocker at the rim, and he's healthy, that'll help. But he's not guarding 5 guys all by himself. There were way too many guys wide open. And they would have a lull in the game, I get that, but it was constant. I mean, it just kept happening over and over. So, in their march first to mediocrity, and then to being good, and then to being better than that, very good or great, the defensive thing's going to have to happen pretty quickly. They're going to have to get better. That just wasn't good enough. Golden State's not a bunch of world beaters, and the problem is they just give up 130 and 140 points too often. And they gave up 140 to Lakers and lost. They gave up 144 to Oklahoma City and lost. They gave up 146 to the Knicks and lost. They gave up 143 to the Lakers again and lost. I mean, the games just keep coming. They gave up 150 to Charlotte and lost. They gave up 144 to Dallas and lost. I mean, it goes on and on. They just gave up 147 to Miami the other night. It's just too many games, and you're not going to win. So they're going to have to figure the defense out. It's just unacceptable, which is basically what you're going to hear from Coach Will Hardy. Let's listen to the best of the Jazz postgame show.
Sure Jazz recap here on DJ and PK 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Jake Scott with you as the Jazz fall last night to the Warriors, 140 to 124. The Jazz were led by Bryce Sensabaugh, 22 points in the loss. He had that in 26 minutes coming in off the bench. Keontae George and Ace Bailey both threw in 19 for the Jazz. But the Warriors had 8 players in double figures, led by Steph Curry, who had 27. Moses Moody added 26 for the Warriors in the win. Let's get to the postgame sound of Jazz head coach Will Hardy.
Defensively, their cutting had us spinning like a top the entire game, and it resulted in a lot of catch-and-shoot threes. Credit to Golden State. They played with a ton of energy and force. We looked slow, sloppy, rundown, and that's how you get a result like that. So we got to get our energy back, be ready to go Friday.
Can you go into kind of more detail on kind of what you're looking for defensively? In this game.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get back cut 75 times in the game. You can't be off the body when we're trying to switch off the ball. You have to play with force. You have to steer and be physical, or else you're just going to be reacting over and over again to a team who, that's their style. They move and cut and pass, and they've done it for a long time. And when they get you spinning like that, they do a great job of making decisions that result in catch-and-shoot threes. It's a credit to them, but we didn't do a good job of keeping our body between them and the basket. And we weren't physical enough to try to slow them up, and so they had us in rotations, not really because of drives, but because of cuts.
It seems like Ace's role changes a little bit game to game. What does that say to his development and who he is as a player?
Yeah, Ace is getting better. I'm really excited about his progress. He's showing us each night, a higher level of understanding of how he can impact the game. He's finding a variety of shots. His catch and shoot three, he's finding ways to be creative off the bounce, especially late in the clock, getting to like his little fadeaway, and some of his isolation stuff. It's very good. He's been a great cutter for us all year. Plays with a lot of energy. I think it's starting to slow down for him a little bit. I feel like early in the year, the reads weren't quite as clean, getting used to his teammates and the style of play and just kind of the pace of the NBA. But Ace is showing a lot of improvement.
Bryce scored 22 tonight. What have you liked about his progression in the last month?
Yeah, Bryce is he's a terrific scorer. He's a threat from everywhere on the court. I think, his ability to get threes off has been a big progression for him over the last, I'm gonna call it year. getting his feet set, especially in the pocket against the switch. He's done a really good job of that. And then, when he does draw matchups that are favorable and he catches the ball on the run in transition or late in the clock, he's been able to create some mid-range opportunities. I think the work he's on his body shows when he makes plays around the rim. Like, he's elevating well and finishing well. He's got a wide array of skills on offense that continue to show up.
When at the end of the third quarter you go Kyle and Lowry out of your front court, and when that happens, who's playing the 5? And I guess in general, when do you kind of want to go small without Flip or Nurk or Kevin, I guess, at the 5?
Yeah, the other team usually tells you who the 5 is. Okay. Where they put the 5 is kind of how you have to operate. And I think there are just moments where, Kyle's ability to switch. Kyle's a pretty good rebounder at his size, and I recognize that he's not a true center, but he gives us some playmaking and ball handling. Made a couple of great, late drop-off passes tonight. So it's something that we've tinkered with more and more this year. Because when you talk about, even Flip and Kevin, for example, like, they're not true 5s either. Kevin's been a 4 for the majority of his career, and so has Flip. I think both of their natural positions is more 4, so you're making the same decision for a little bit of a different skill set, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, we're giving up a little bit of size and some of those things like we would with Flip and Kevin, but different games sometimes call for different things.
You touched on it, but what are kind of the unique challenges that Golden State presents for your defense?
Yeah, they do a great job of their cutting actions happen with the ball in a variety of places. It's not just top of the key. It's not just post. They do some post, some elbow, some top of the key, sometimes on the wing. Like, they find different places to make the ball static, and they cut. And so it's a lot of different situations that require communication. Sometimes it's 2 people involved. Sometimes it's 3. And then obviously, Steph Curry, the threat of Steph Curry is something that we all react to. Steph is the greatest shooter of all time, also a pretty outstanding cutter. If you go back and watch him over the course of his career, and even now, like, he finds his way to the basket cutting for layups, and just draws so much attention that a lot of times he's taking 2 people with him. They do a great job as a group of making quick decisions once they create the rotations defensively. And it's just a little bit different because it's not dribble drive that's creating the rotations, a lot of cutting.
That's Jazz head coach Will Hardy. Let's now move on to Keontae George.
Well, it's always cool to, go against the best in our league and, been able to have some good battles against the Warriors since, I've been in the league. And, as a team, we've been able to battle against them. So it's always fun when you play somebody that, you see watching on the TV and, that group has a lot of success and, that's what we're striving for. So, it's always fun to compete and, see where you're at.
I liked, though, that, they're guys that you've looked up to. They've won championships. But the young guys, like Ace isn't unafraid. He's going right inside. Flip goes right into Draymond. How are you guys? It's cool to play against them, but you're not, taking a back seat in any way.
It's our profession. At the end of the day, we love to hoop. And, everybody on this team is competitive and, we want to win at the end of the day. So whatever it takes. And, we trust in our ability and what we can do on the floor, on offense and defense. And, we just trust the work and, play with no fear.
Thank you so much.
That's Keontae George. Keontae in the loss to the Warriors, 19 points, 7 assists, and 6 rebounds. Up next for the Jazz, they take on the Brooklyn Nets at Delta Center coming up tomorrow night. Tip-off for that game will be at 7:30. Pre-game coverage begins at 6:30.
All right, there's the Best of the Jazz post-game show. More hoops coming up. We will talk a little BYU basketball and a little Jazz rebuild with a guy who's very optimistic, talking 45 wins next year, which is going to mean better defense for sure. Tim LaComb's coming up. Stay with us. DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Coming up this morning, we got Cole Bagley joining us to talk Utah Mammoth hockey. They are wrapping up a big road trip in Carolina. They've taken 4 points in 3 games. It's a good trip. But they get a point or two at Carolina, it becomes a great trip. So we'll talk with him coming up at 8:30 this morning. And then Matt Tate joins us to preview the BYU-Kansas game this weekend. He'll be here at 9 o'clock. Right now, Tim LaComb. He joined us in yesterday's show, so obviously he didn't know about the blowout that was coming as the Warriors lit up the Jazz 140-124. But he had bigger picture thoughts on the rebuild. Here's Tim with PK and I. Tim, good morning.
You miss 100% of the shots you never take.
I've taken a few shots, let me tell you. Take
and
shots
you're about
all the
to take
time.
another one.
I know, man.
What's up, fellas?
Take them constantly.
The Clippers by 12. The Clippers by 15.
Yes.
The Clippers by... Yeah. See anything in there? I mean, you had to know how it was going to go when you saw the starting lineup. You knew what was going on.
Yeah, and it was Lowry, getting back to action.
Mm-hmm.
And while it moved around good, he even minute afterwards. And we had CJ Miles on in pregame for the whole time. It was awesome. And, CJ said, Lowry will be fine with everything but wind. Wind is the thing that jumps up and gets you when you're making your return that first game back. And I felt like he was short on some shots and things like that. But it was good to have him back. No Nurk, no Keontae, no win.
Well, they had a stretch of 14 games where they played 500 ball, and right around the first of the year, they decided enough of that. And so they are now, I don't even know what it is now, I think it's 3-13 in their last 16 games, and they're just not playing Markkanen and Keontae George together very often. And sitting Nurkic when they need to.
And what I need you to do is just look ahead to, like, April.
35 games from now when it's all over, thank goodness, April 12th?
Yeah, I don't know how many days that is, but let's get to that point because I've said it here, and PK's, quoted me a couple times. 45 wins next year minimum. And
minimum?
And we get rolling.
I'd take that right now.
Do you see how the Jazz can get there?
Well, tell me who they add to the roster. I mean, I think we've seen it a couple times in Jazz history where you had a couple veterans who know how to play and give you the experience, and you can pick up 10 wins, especially through that middle when you're trying to move from 30 wins to 50. You can pick up 10 wins in that range pretty quick. After 50 wins get really hard to come by. You really got to earn them.
Right. And good point. I don't know. We don't know who they're going to add to the roster, but I'm saying roster presently constituted. Whoever is added at this point, to me, is just kind of extra. But, if all things were equal this year, I think this team, Walker Kessler doesn't get hurt, first and foremost. I think it changes things. But we are where we are. So, circle that date in April.
Have you been able to watch any of these college kids to figure out who could be potential franchise changers?
We do have the luxury of having a couple of TVs up there in the studio, and 82 nights a year, that's the thing that jumps out. That's fairly daunting. So if you're going to catch or consume college hoop, you better be doing it at the same time. And so, we've gotten a look at, obviously, AJ a bunch.
Yeah.
And I've seen Boozer a handful of times. Yeah, and I've seen Peterson when he plays, and I've talked to a lot of different people too, and it's interesting. I think there's kind of different camps, but I think any one of those three guys added to this roster could be really, really powerful in different ways. And, that's why you just let this thing play out and see where you are going to pick. But this seems to be, from a depth perspective, a pretty decent, deep draft.
Yeah, so obviously if you draft anything but one, you have to take who's available, and in each subsequent spot that is a bit lower, you take who the other guys, you don't get to take who they took. just assume, just for argument's sake, the number one pick, right? And that would be awesome. We'd all love that. And so you look at guys like Darren Peterson, who've been in and out of the lineup a little bit. DeBonsa, we've seen him play live multiple times and on TV many times. He's tantalizing. Boozer, it seemed like I've been watching Boozer play for 2 or 3 years now, and he was on the other night before the Cougars played the Wildcats. He didn't do a whole lot, but to me, his body is ready, and I think they list him at 6'9", 230-ish. Not a big high flyer, but an extremely productive player. So if I grant you, as the Jazz shareholder, the number one pick, who are you taking?
I think this very point in time with what I've been able to consume, I think it's probably going to be either Peterson or AJ. My concerns, that's the beautiful thing about this is, even though they're going to be the number one pick, there's going to still be people that think, it should be somebody else.
Yeah.
And that all gets worked out. But, to me, it looks like, AJ is obviously a guy who can play and be really effective at this point. I think it's tightening some things down. I think defensively he can be better. He can be better in help. He can be better on ball at times. But that's pretty much any player that's going up through the process. I just like how he's responded during the season to adversity. It's one thing I look at, and they went and played UConn in Boston, and those guys just jumped him in that first half. And, a weak guy goes away, but he definitely answered the bell. I think that's happened a few times. And just by virtue of the fact that he's, been out there and taken – there's a mystery about Peterson, kind of in and out of the lineup. And that's not always bad because sometimes the people around you send crazy signals, and all you have to do is look back with Ace. I think some people got thrown off the scent because they were distracted by the people around the kid. And so oftentimes, that's why they talk to lots and lots of people. I told you guys, I used to call me, as a down the line assistant at a school that had a guy that may be drafted, and they still spent the time to talk. And not just talk, but talk for like 45 minutes. So that's where all this stuff gets sorted out. I think that's where the positioning really settles in, is once you have a read on the player and the person and the people around them, and then you can kind of make that educated guess. Long-winded answer, I think I'd go with AJ at this point in time because of what I've been able to see based on some of the other things.
Tim LaComb joining us. Tim, BYU is at Kansas this weekend. A couple of nationally ranked teams squaring off. They're both 5-2 in league. Obviously, it could be a matchup of the top two picks in the draft, but we don't really know Peterson's feelings. Who knows? They're getting a better record without him than they have with him. And they're 7-3 when Darren Peterson plays. They're 8-2 without him. And a little bit of that is, which games do you play and which games do you sit? What are the odds the Cougars are going to do this?
Well, they've won there before, right? And that's always good, albeit a different, different situation entirely. But I think the important thing is, for them, and you guys hit on this last week, and I kind of watched it, but outside the three-point shot and floor spacing is going to be really important, and particularly in this game. Big, strong athletes. I will say Kansas isn't currently what Kansas used to be. You kind of see as talent gets spread around, they don't have now some of those guys that used to be on their bench, gone out and gotten paid somewhere else. But I think entirely a tough place to play. BYU really needs to answer after the Arizona game. I thought their fight was impressive, but it really comes down to two things to me. It's how they start and their ability consistently throughout the game, to make enough shots from three to keep that thing a game.
I may say something that's inconsistent, but certainly it won't be the first time, nor will it be the last. I don't mind DeBonsa trying to take over games, and we've seen that, and we've seen it been successful. I thought the other night obviously wasn't as successful. So I'm going to say, go ahead. You have the ability to take over it, but at the same time, don't force it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I've actually got a great scenario for that because I was watching a little tape on him. And so much of the don't force it is situational understanding. I watch it every night in the NBA, and there's a way different feel to a possession when the ball gets moved around and you gain an advantage, as opposed to the possession I saw with AJ. I think he dribbled down the ball down the right side, 20 plus seconds on the shot clock, and he instantly gets into a back down. And with 22 seconds on the shot clock, takes a contested, very, very contested 2. And, I think that's playing into what the defense wants from BYU. I think when BYU's at their best, AJ's certainly, that attack guy, but it's in situations that work. In that one possession, it just kind of personifies nobody else touched the ball. At contested 2 with more than 20 seconds on the shot clock, there's good players on that team. So I think at times, there is a period where he maybe tries to do too much. Rob Wright was bottom line is those guys get paid a lot of money now. And these guys are the guys they brought in to win games. And, they're not going to win many games when Rob Wright shoots the ball the way he did the other night. And, I do think there's got to be a fine balance between their ability to play one-on-one and their ability to use one-on-one situationally as a really powerful weapon.
Do you believe in what Matt Harpring once called the law of numbers, that coming off a great game, DeBonsa he shot the ball very well against Utah, 15 of 24, 4 of 5 and 3. He was bound to cool off a little bit, which he did against Arizona, which is obviously an elite team defensively. So do you expect a bounce-back game out of him against Kansas? Because he's not a 25% shooter either.
No, I expect him to play better. The kid he's answered the bell. I was probably not having a lot of knowledge, having this new phenomenon where all of a sudden Provo is the place for number one, guys in the country, which I think is awesome. I had another guy here the other night, Branch, but it's just a little different. So it took some getting used to. And so some of that stuff, like as you hear about him coming in, you grip for what's it going to be. And I think he's done a great job of fitting in. I just think at times, he can be there's a fine line to being assertive out there. And I think you always want to err on the right side of that. But when he's been at his best, it's been kind of a team effort. And I think, if BYU wants to get as far as they can get, it needs to be on the shoulders of a couple of those guys and then everybody else pitching in. I'm a fan of AJ. I think he's definitely got my attention, and I was a little skeptical on some of it early on. We made the move to St. George, and there was a coach fired down there. There was a lot of things that, as a coach, you get your antenna up and go, what exactly is the situation? But everything I've heard from the people there, everything, I've heard from the teammates, everything, just what a positive kid, what a hardworking kid. And so now you just want it to get it all to work, and what a place to have it get to work at Kansas on a big Saturday situation.
How about Rob getting into the teeth of the defense, but not going all the way, because it seems he can get in there, but the deeper he gets, the more difficult it is for him.
Yeah, his sweet spot seems to be kind of either getting all the way, like when he's got enough to be able to hit the floater, or he's got that really nice where he comes, I guess, the shot that got blocked at the end of the game. It's actually a pretty nice move. And he had, for an inkling, if he could have got that thing up quick, he had a window. But yeah, I like the way he attacks. And you see it with Collier often. The objective to basketball is to get a piece of the paint. You want to get that ball into the paint because it's a distraction for everybody else that's got an assignment. And they may turn their head to look at you the minute that happens. You're throwing that thing past their ear to the three-point line. And I think that's what I'd like to see maybe a little bit more from Wright. I like his scoring mindset. But like the other night when it was just obvious he was struggling to get it to go, even on that last play, if he couldn't have got that off, I thought he might have been able to rifle that thing out to the top of the key to Bostic, who was, or what's the kid's name? Not Bostic, 5 was wide open at the top of the key.
Boscovich, yeah, my bad. And he kind of had his hands ready and everything, but it got blocked. So, I mean, I just think those opportunities are there. And those guys, Rob and AJ, again, they're the guys that are carrying a lot of the weight with Richie and Kata. They've got to be, as the season progresses in those pivotal moments, they got to be more sound.
All right, there is Tim LaComb. When we come back, we are talking Olympics with Sam Farnsworth, getting ready to go to Italy. Stay with us. DJ PK, and we are joined by Sam Farnsworth, who was packing bags but has paused for a minute to talk to us. Sam, good morning.
What's up, guys? Good morning.
The Milan Olympics are up, and you are headed to Italy for about a month. Now, on the surface, that sounds awesome, but there's probably lots of stuff we don't know. So the best thing about going to Italy for a month and the worst thing about going to Italy for a month, please explain.
Oh, man. Well, I guess the best thing is I've never been before, so that, it's always cool and unique to travel somewhere you've never been before, to see new things, to experience new foods and a little bit of new culture, even though you're kind of in that Olympic bubble. I really enjoy that aspect of it. The worst thing by far is, and maybe you guys have heard the stories from others before, but the sleep we get or don't get out there, that part's tricky. I feel like because I went to France a year and a half ago, I feel like maybe it's still sort of fresh and I kind of know the routine that's in the same time zone. But basically when I was in France, I slept in 2 shifts. I had about a 2-hour shift and then about a 4-hour shift. Those were my sleeping times. The first week was terrible. I thought I might not wake up. I thought maybe my heart will stop or something, and I'm not going to end up getting out of France. But after that first week, I really got into it, and I got used to it. So I'm hoping I get into it again, get used to it again pretty quickly, because that part is, the adjustment part's pretty brutal.
You and I had a discussion at a football game about the Olympics and what you'd be covering, and you said that it would be different in this time because it is far more spread out. Explain how that is going to work for you and your coverage for KSL.
It's crazy. So, I mean, you think about how spoiled we are here in Utah, even to another extent. I'll just, even not from an Olympic standpoint, from a skiing standpoint, those of us who love the slopes, who like to ski or snowboard or whatever, you think of how many resorts you are within, an hour or less to all across the Wasatch Front, right? When I lived in Colorado, the closest resort to me living on the Front Range of Colorado was still 2 hours away, and then you had to fight traffic. So it's, even that aspect of it. But from an Olympic standpoint now, all of the venues that are here in Utah, again, an hour and a half maybe from Salt Lake to get to almost every single venue, and at the most. And in Milan, there's a reason why it's Milan Cortina, right? Because Milan and Cortina really are very far apart. If I were to take a train ride, it would take me, I think, 5.5, 6 hours to get to Cortina. So our team that's going out there is actually, so myself and Deanie Wimmer and Mark Wetzel, our photographer, we are flying into Milan. Matt Gephardt and Mike Anderson are actually taking a separate flight and to get to Cortina. So, it's crazy how far apart they are. And then even on top of that, a part of my Olympic coverage, about a week in to Milan, I'll be getting on a train and going about a 4-hour train ride to the north up to the mountains to watch some of our free skiers. So it is way spread apart. And it will have its challenges with our coverage, but as a result, I'm really curious to see how they celebrate the Olympians. Do they bring them all back to Milan from wherever they were at when they get their medals? Do they celebrate them at the venues they're at? So there's going to be a lot of new and interesting aspects to these games.
You have to do a lot of interviews before you go so that you can advance whatever the competition is, in the next 24 hours. How much of the games do you get to see there, and how much do you do based on the competition there, and how much are you just constantly doing live shots and advancing whatever the next thing is?
Yeah, especially the advancing part, right? Just working on that next story, that next interview, and things like that, and the content, gathering the content actually prohibits us from being able to watch a lot of competition. So whatever event I choose, and I'm just basing this off of my experience in France, but whatever event I choose, that's kind of the event I'm at for the day. And so if I'm to go to the USA hockey game on February 12th, their opening game, that might be the only event I go to the entire day, and I might not know what happened up on the slopes with our local skiers, or vice versa. If I go up to the slopes for some of these freestyle skiers and I'm following them, I might not know what happened in speed skating or whatever until I catch up online, just like the rest of us, right? That part is a little bit challenging, and a lot of it has to do with, for the most part, we're all doing the one-man band thing. We call that in our industry one-man band, like where I'm taking my own camera, lights, microphones. I got to run it all myself, which is, actually part of the job I enjoy. But as a result, you're so focused and entrenched in what that one story is you're working on today that sometimes you're not always up to date with everything else. I try my best to follow everything as we're going along and make sure I know where our local athletes are. But that is one of the challenges that you bring up there, DJ.
You mentioned the folks that will be going with you, and we know you as a sports person, but we know the others that you named as news people. How will they be covering it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's the one thing, I guess the one thing we all have in common is we're all storytellers in our own right? Just like you guys are both as well. We all have different ways of telling stories and relaying information. So we all have that commonality. So even though I might know a little more about the athletes themselves because I've covered them and followed them throughout their careers, throughout my career, as a sports journalist, right? And maybe they're not quite as in tune with that. Those guys are still great at gathering the information and finding out what the story is behind an athlete or behind, the culture. Mike Anderson's going to do like a lot of cultural pieces too, and kind of relate how does Cortina relate to maybe Park City and the mountains we have here, things like that. So they all have their own unique ways and different ways of storytelling. Mine will be a lot more focused on the athletes and the scores, right, to games similar to what you might see on a sportscast here. But at the same time, I'll be getting access to those athletes, and, knock on wood, that the way it works at the Olympics is every athlete is required to walk through a mixed zone for the media to talk to. So, I'm going to be hunting down all of our local guys as best I can to bring those interviews as well. But yeah, I mean, even though my focus is more sports related, each one of them will have a very unique way of telling the story of the Olympic Games. And I think it'll reach all of our viewers back here in Utah.
The mixed zone, that is such an international sports thing, right? It's very common in internet, but it's not what we're used to here. So explain to people how you have to stand behind a barrier and yell at people who may or may not be able to see you when they turn their head because other people might be walking by.
No, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And I think the closest thing, if you've ever been media at a golf PGA tournament event, they have something similar, but it's still not quite the same. Mixed zone in the Olympics is, it basically, as they leave the playing surface, the competition arena or the slopes or whatever, it's kind of like a roped up, almost like a queue that when you're waiting in line for a ride at Disneyland or at Lagoon, that kind of, they have to walk through the queue. It kind of winds back and forth where you've got print and print journalists in one section, radio or podcasting journalists in another section, and then the TV journalists at the end. They have to walk past all of them. They're not required, I guess, to stop. So it's up to the journalists to be like, hey, over here, can I talk to you real quick? Clayton Keller, hey, Sam Farnsworth, KSL, Salt Lake City. Can you just stop for a minute? So you got to get their attention. You got to get their attention. And you mentioned earlier, DJ, about doing some of these interviews before we leave. A big strategy of mine and reason why I do these interviews before I leave is to develop a little more of that face-to-face recognition and to let them know, hey, I was at Mammoth practice 2 weeks ago, and I was like, hey, Clayton, just so you know, I'm going to be out there. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. You're probably going to get sick of me. And I'm like, believe me, I will not be sick of talking to you in Milan. But to try to develop that relationship previously so that when they do walk through that mix zone, hopefully they'll remember and they'll stop and give me just 2 or 3 quick minutes.
I believe that Italy, I don't know if they have different time zones, but I believe that the basic time zone that they have is 8 hours ahead of what we are. So it's about in the 5 o'clock hour right now. With that in mind, how do you know, or do you know, how the television is going to play out for the viewership for those of us here in Utah who want to watch all this stuff on KSL?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because of the media age we're in now, you can watch every event live now with the Peacock app or the NBC Sports app. So pretty much everyone can watch everything live at whatever time in the morning or night. So when most events are happening in Milan, I think that'll be mostly midday. Mid-morning, midday, early afternoon here.
Yeah.
There will be a few, I'm trying to remember, in the primetime coverage, maybe not, now that I'm thinking of the time zone difference. I felt like in France there were a few live things in the primetime coverage, but probably not. It's probably all going to be kind of recapped and everything. And so, I think gone are the days of spoilers, even though, people who are turning on the primetime NBC coverage of Olympic events, we just have information at the tip of our fingers now, right? We can find it so quickly that when I'm going on live at 10 p.m., even though there's going to be another wave of NBC Olympic coverage coming on after my live hit, I kind of feel like, maybe I'll throw out a warning, hey, if you really don't want to know, turn the volume down or something. But I feel like by then, if they didn't already know, if they didn't already find out, then sorry, tough luck. It's just in that age we're in now where you can find out exactly when it happens. But yeah, I think most of the live coverage will be about midday, early afternoon between NBC and their apps.
I think when it's been in Europe before, and to PK's point, though, maybe this was with a 7, 9, or 10-hour time difference, it seems like sometimes there's been live stuff actually in the late-night show that's early morning there, something like skiing where they don't want the sun on the slopes all day long. So you just got to kind of figure that out as it goes, I suppose. And if you're going to do that, then you're going to end up sleeping in shifts just like you, Sam.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Sleeping shifts at home so you can get up and watch all the events live.
So do you have to, are you live? What shows do they put you live in? This is how your sleep schedule. So you're live are you live in the 10 o'clock every day?
Usually. Yeah. And that's going to be the plan again, but it's also always kind of a, be ready to adjust on any given day depending on what their needs are back here.
Yeah, but that's 6 a.m. in Italy.
Right, it is.
So if they decide to adjust at 8 o'clock here at 4 a.m., well, what do they think you're doing at 4 a.m.? You're sleeping.
You don't know Sam. I'll just leave that right there.
Sam at 4 a.m. in Italy.
Yeah, so they assign us to kind of which shows we're going to be in, and I'm assigned primarily to the 10, which, yes, is 6 a.m. There was only a couple of times where they're like, hey, can you be live in the 5 or 6, which was, 2 a.m., something like that out there. And so I basically got used to going to sleep about 2 to 2:30 anyway. When I was in France, I was doing all my work up to that point. If they needed me live before then, I could do a quick live hit. Then I'd sleep for my 2 hours. I'd get up between 4 and 4:30. I'd hit my shuttle at 5, which took me to my live shot location, got me there pretty quick, and I was able to get all set up, do my live shot at 6. When I was done with that, I'd come back to the hotel, eat breakfast, and then I'd sleep for my 3.5, 4.5 hours till about 10 to 11 a.m. And then I'd get up and rinse and repeat. So I'm thinking maybe it'll be similar in Italy, but I'm also prepared to be surprised. And hopefully it's pretty smooth though.
When are the opening ceremonies?
February 5th. It's a Thursday, I believe. So, but February 5th is the opening ceremonies, and then full go from there.
So how many Olympics is this for you?
2.
So I say 2.5 because France was my first on-site. I was supposed to go to Beijing 4 years ago, and it's super unique circumstances. Obviously, we were kind of at the tail end of COVID in 2022. But the obviously the communist government in China, they were very strict with how they handled COVID and things like that. And it was probably about 5 days before I was supposed to leave when KSL finally, Bonneville, they pulled the plug. They're like, it's just not safe. We're not going to do it. They had already paid for things, and they were okay with pulling the plug. I was okay with going, and I tried to let them know, hey, I'm okay. My family's okay. We're all ready for this. We've been preparing for this for months. I'm ready to go. But they just said, it's not worth the risk. Let's keep you home. But then Alex Cabrera, our Olympic legend, was able to put his foot down and say, hey, I'm going. So he ended up going. We sent one reporter to Beijing, and then I covered the Beijing games from families' watch parties and things like that out here in Park City or at events that were at the Oval. So I still kind of covered the games-ish. I've got the credential that was sent to me. I've got all that stuff. I just never actually stepped foot in Beijing. So I'll say 2.5 Olympics.
Okay.
And they're not going to send you over coach, are they? You're going to get that to business or first class?
I wish. I have no idea. NBC's got a charter flight, and they said you don't get to choose your seat. So I just hope I'm not stuck in the middle seat.
So you're flying with like people from NBC stations all over the country?
Yeah, we'll fly from Salt Lake City tomorrow morning, and we'll land in Atlanta, and they've got a charter flight there where they're flying NBC. All the people who are working with NBC or NBC affiliates, they'll all meet there and get on that flight. At least the people going to Milan will be going there and getting on the charter flight, and we'll head to Milan. The other guys, they're flying to Venice. They have to fly to Venice, get off in Venice, get on a train or a bus there for a couple of hours to get up to Cortina.
I just hope you're not in the C boarding group.
Yeah, I just hope that there's a empty seat in between each person, right? Let's space it out a little bit. I don't know how many people are on the flight or how big the plane is.
No chance, dude. This is transatlantic. They are filling that thing up.
They're going to pack it.
Enjoy your peanuts.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Sam, thanks for coming on and talking Olympics with us. We appreciate it, and we'll see you while you're out there.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. There is Sam Farnsworth on his way to the Olympics. When we come back, what is trending? The headlines are next.